Good afternoon and happy Friday to you. How are you doing? I am just going to put this on Do Not Disturb so it doesn't keep sending me lots of notifications. Hello lovely people, happy Friday. What another beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day here in East London. I hope that it is lovely and sunny wherever you are. Quite a few people joining us, so welcome to you, lovely to see you. We'll get started in a second, but just to say that it has been the most beautiful spring so far, hasn't it? I've started training with my personal trainer Gabriel again, and it's just so lovely to be outside. It is just absolutely wonderful. It's such a privilege to be able to have this wonderful sunshine. I was thinking actually, someone was saying to me the other day, if it wasn't for coronavirus, all the media would be full of stories of how this was the most beautiful spring that any of us have ever seen. So yes, wonderful to be able to be outside, wonderful to be able to train outside, socially distanced of course. I think I mentioned socially distancing boxing last week. If you haven't tried it, I would recommend it. Rubber bands and boxing and crunches and push-ups and all that good stuff with the rubber band. So yeah, a very interesting way of boxing and actually much nicer on your hands. So not so much impact, not as much fun as actually getting to hit somebody, which sometimes can be quite great from a stress relief perspective. So just a few more people joining. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining. I am going to give you before I get started, I'm going to give you my weekly bird update. So it has been a little bit quiet here on the baby front. We do still see the Canada geese with their two babies, but I'm not sure where the grey lag geese have gone. They're the ones with the orange beaks and the pink legs. I'm not quite sure where they've gone. The two Egyptian geese, who are absolutely beautiful, they're the ones with all the kind of strained brown and orange and red colours. No signs, there are definitely a couple, but no signs of babies yet. We haven't seen many ducks recently, so I don't know where the mummy is with the 10 babies that I told you about last week. I've got no idea where she's hiding them. Although, of course, it is quite a big dock here and it is open to the Thames, so quite frankly, she could actually be anywhere. The very, very, very exciting news that I do need to share with you is that the swans have moved. Now, the reason why this is so significant is that unlike some birds, who stay on the nest once they've hatched their babies, so like the coots and the grebes and those kinds of birds, they kind of stay put, and often even the ducks and the geese do as well. We've noticed over the years that swans move their cygnets immediately after they've hatched. And so yesterday morning, when we went for our very early morning walk, we noticed that neither mummy or daddy is sitting on their nest anymore. So we got very excited, and so we've been hunting for the babies, but we haven't found them yet. So again, they may have gone, obviously swans can go huge distances. They put their babies on their backs. So I will keep you posted on that. So it's a kind of a bird update, but not really much new to report, apart from the fact that we do have new baby swans, we believe, but I can't tell you how many or where they are yet until I track them down. So how are we doing this week? How are you doing? How's your business? How's your team? What have you been working on? Do let me know. And I'm wondering how you're all feeling about coming out of lockdown, actually. So the restrictions are slowly easing here in the UK. I don't know how things are where you are. Thank you for joining, Sally. Nice to see you, and Tom. I hope that things are okay in your part of the world. There's some crazy things happening over in Southeast Asia, I'm seeing, so hope that you are safe and well. What are the restrictions like where you are? So here in the UK, they are starting to ease, and I have to say that I'm feeling extremely optimistic and positive. This lockdown has actually impacted me and my business in very, very positive ways. So I'm feeling very, very positive. And the easing of restrictions actually isn't impacting me a huge deal, but for some of my clients and some of you in this group, it's really being a huge shift. So I'm wondering how you're feeling about that. Hi, thanks for joining. So this week we held our May community event and it had the theme of coming out of lockdown. So it was very well attended, a nice group of people and some really good discussion, really interesting discussions. It was all about what coming out of lockdown means for business owners, for their teams and for their businesses. And one of the main themes of the discussion was actually around the role of you as a business owner as you come out of this crisis, and what do you really want your role to be in the business, and is it the same as what you wanted prior to coming into this period of time? And there were some really interesting perspectives on that. So yeah, what do you really want from your business, and has that changed during that period? Are you thinking differently about it now? And I think the other theme was around assumptions. So people are generally checking in with their team members and with their colleagues. I'm encouraging people, by the way, to do that. Even if you furloughed your team, you still need to check in with them. Not in a kind of a work way, but in a kind of a how are you doing way. And what we were talking about during the community event on Tuesday is that people were kind of checking in with people but not necessarily asking them how they're doing. We make these assumptions. We think we know what people are thinking, we think we know what people are feeling, and it's really important to just ask people. So that was a couple of things that came up on the community event. And yeah, these events are being really well attended, so hopefully you'll be able to join the next one, which is, I believe, from memory, the 30th of June, but I'll post it in the group in the next few days. So I mentioned last week that I've been running some workshops on people management for the Royal Academy of Engineering. And we have some people that have joined this group, so welcome to you. And even it looks like maybe some people watching today, so welcome to everybody that is watching. And following the workshop last week on how to build a strong management team, what I did is I profiled everybody. So many of you in this group have already done the Talent Dynamics profiling, and so I profiled everybody that was going to be on this management leadership workshop. And then I explained how you can use your understanding of how people are wired to build a more productive team and build up trust in your team. And after the workshop, several people got in touch to sort of discuss their individual profiles with me, and also to talk through some different management challenges that they're having. And some really interesting discussions and topics that were coming up. But this theme of sort of authority kept coming up in these various discussions. And so I thought it would be a really good topic a really good subject, if you like, for today's live, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this subject. So where does our authority come from, and what does it actually mean to be the boss? How do we manage people who are more experienced than us, maybe, or maybe even more able or capable than us? And how do you get people to do what you want? And what do you do when people disagree? So these are some of the questions that I've been thinking about in preparation for today's live, and I want to share my thoughts with you. And as always, I'm really interested to hear what you think and what your experience of this is. So the first thing that I would like to say about this is that one of the most misunderstood aspects of management is that it's about telling people what to do. And I believe, and based on all of my experience, management is much more about asking people. And so that's one of the shifts that I definitely encourage the people that I'm working with to make. Move from telling to asking. People often when they become new managers or they start managing for the first time, I think they need to know everything. And I know that I certainly did my first management job. I was really worried because the team that I was managing were doing things that I didn't really understand, didn't really know much about. I was in a new country, in a new market, in a new culture, and it was all very different and strange for me. And I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to serve them properly as their manager. And what happens when you set targets, when you tell people, when you're the one with all the answers, is that actually when things start getting tough, as they inevitably do on this wonderful entrepreneurial journey that we're all on, you start applying the pressure. You're the boss, right? And you're the one that's maybe committed to your board or to your shareholders or to your customers. And so you start applying that pressure. And then what happens is some people start to kind of channel their inner child, and they kind of start saying, yeah, well, I always told you that it was unrealistic, and I always told you that this target wasn't really, we couldn't really achieve it, and things like, well, don't ask me, what are you going to do about it? And so it keeps coming back at you if you're the one that set the targets and set the goals. So my first very important tip is to get the other person to set their own targets, draft their own role profile. People always say to me, really? You get people to draft their own role profile? Absolutely. You define the job, you draft it out. Ultimately, I'll decide, I'm the boss, but you bring it to me. Let's have a discussion about what you think the role should look like, about what targets you think are achievable, about what you think your objectives should be, what you want to be working on. Much, much, much better way of doing things. Ask them what they think is achievable and then hold them to it. It's kind of like that giving somebody enough rope to hang themselves. And I don't mean that in a nasty way. I'm saying treat people like adults. Yeah, let's not treat them like children and tell them what to do. Treat them like adults. Ask them what they think is achievable. Ask them what they want to be held accountable for. Ask them what standards they think they should be held to. And the same principle actually applies if you have a management team. So what standards do they want to hold themselves and each other to? What is acceptable in terms of timeliness, delivering on commitments and holding each other to account? What do they think is acceptable? What do they want to sign up to? Get people involved in setting goals and targets. You might have commitments that you've given to the board or targets that you've set out to your team or to your shareholders, but get your team involved in setting those targets. And it is so much easier to hold somebody accountable to something that they've come up with and agreed to rather than something that you've just directed. So we want to achieve great things in this company, right? So let's set ourselves some ambitious targets. Let's set ourselves some ambitious goals. What are we willing to commit to? What are we willing to commit to? Yeah, much better than I'm the boss and I'm going to tell you. So that's my first tip, really, is to ask the other person to set their objectives, goals, targets, etc. My second really important tip is to have regular one-to-ones with all of your people. I often get asked, how many people can one person manage? And my answer is about 5 or 6. Any more than that, you can't really be a good manager in my view. And one of the reasons is that I strongly recommend regular one-to-ones. I mean weekly one-to-ones with your people, diarised one-to-ones. So it's a slot of time in your diary that you are giving to them and it is their time. And people often in small companies say to me, well, what's the point of that? We see each other every single day. But that's not the point. That's a different kind of seeing each other. Yes, you pass in the office or in the gym or in the whatever your work environment is. Yes, you see each other. That is not the same as saying, I am making this time available for you. And what happens, it's a kind of magic. All those things that maybe people wouldn't have bothered you with because you're so busy and so important, you're the boss, right? All of those things, they start coming up because you've made this time in the diary and you sit there and you say, right, how's it going, Fred? How's it going, Tom? How are you doing, Sarah? How are you feeling this week? How are things going? What would you like to share with me? And a kind of magic happens because people have to come up with things to share with you. They tell you things because you're there and you're asking them, things that they would never normally bother you with. And the point about this is that I really strongly recommend that as part of these regular dialogues with each individual, that you include feedback into these regular conversations. Do not wait for that annual appraisal, that awkward time where you bring up all those things, you dredge up all those things from months and months ago that the person doesn't even remember what you're talking about. Include regular feedback in your one-to-ones. And the way to start is to ask for feedback yourself. What could I be doing better? How can I help you do your job better? How could I be a better manager? How can I get the best from you? What do you need to make you more productive? What blockers are you facing and how can I help you move them? What else can I do for you? Yeah, these kinds of questions. Now, not everyone is going to find it particularly comfortable to give you feedback. So you need to be okay with it being a bit uncomfortable. And you need to be okay with asking a question and then zipping and being quiet and allowing the other person to formulate what it is that they might find quite difficult, but probably they do actually want to share with you. And once the person realises that you're serious and you really do want to hear what they think, they will start to trust that you are genuine, that you do actually want to hear what they have to say. And that might take a little while. You might have to gently kind of ask, like, I really do actually want to know what would make me a better manager. I do really want to know what I could do to help you, what I could do better to help you do your job. Whatever feedback you get, always thank them, because it can be quite intimidating to give somebody else feedback, especially somebody who's your boss, who's hired you, who pays your wages, who pays your salary. So always thank them for their feedback, whether you agree with it or not, I don't care. Always thank them for their feedback and never get defensive, never explain. Say thank you and then think about it. Think about what that looks like from the other person's perspective, because whatever they're telling you, that is their perspective, that is valid, it's not wrong, there's no wrong feedback. They are telling you their view of the world, how they see what you're doing or how you're doing it, and so that is valid, and you should be thankful that they have been brave enough and honest enough to give you that feedback. So don't explain, just listen and tell them that you will come back to them with some thoughts. You don't necessarily have to change anything, but you do have to take it on board and understand that that's what the other person is telling you. And so the point really of asking them for feedback is so that you can understand, you can learn where they're coming from, but also then it makes it easier for you to reciprocate, of course. And so then you can give them feedback about what you think they're doing well and what you think they should be improving on. And if the person has been involved in drafting their role profile and drafting their objectives, again, so much easier. Well, you said that you wanted to work a bit more on your communication skills, and this is what I have observed. Let me give you some feedback about the conversation that I observed you having with this person. This is what I think you did really well, and this is what I think you could still improve on. What do you think? So that is my second tip, is to involve regular feedback both ways in your one-to-ones. Now, if the person doesn't meet those targets, those standards, those expectations that they themselves have helped to set, then we need to move on to my third tip. And that is asking them what they think the consequences should be. There's a bit of a theme going on here, you'll notice. So I ran a workshop on Wednesday of this week about getting out of the day-to-day running of your business. And one of the participants said that he used this with his daughter, which I think is just genius. So what do you think your punishment should be for being on your iPad when we'd agreed that you would spend the next hour practicing your violin? How genius is that? And the best thing is she said, I think you should take my iPad away for the next couple of days. How brilliant is that? Absolutely love that, brilliant. So ask the other person, what would they do if they were in your shoes? If they were in your shoes and they had committed to something and not delivered, what would they do? What did they think the consequences should be? And also obviously ask them what you can do to help. Remind them that these were targets that they set for themselves or they were involved in setting. And ask them whether or not they agree whether or not you can continue to hold them to that standard. So it's a dialogue, and it's asking them, these are adults we're talking about, right? And particularly with more senior people, this is a much more sensible and grown-up conversation to have rather than It's a much, much easier conversation to have this conversation, of course, if you've started off by asking rather than telling. That's the point of this, really. So I've talked about values before, and ultimately, if a person isn't interested in setting ambitious targets and isn't interested or doesn't own up to their own mistakes, or they're not interested in engaging in a meaningful conversation about what to do if they're falling behind, or they're missing deadlines, or not reaching the quality standard, then it really might be time to say goodbye to them. And I think we all need to be honest about when that happens. I always advise people to avoid hiring too quickly and firing too slowly. So a person who is wrong for your business will have the potential to have a hugely, hugely negative impact on you and on your team. And when you're a small team, each person actually has a massive, massive impact on that culture that you're building within your organisation. And so what I would say is, don't be afraid to admit when you've made a hiring mistake. Sometimes we all make mistakes, and sometimes it's just time to say goodbye in a professional way, but don't delay. Yeah, when it's not right, it's not right, and you know it in your gut. Yeah, when the values aren't aligned, you know it in your gut, and I've spoken about this before. So where does our authority come from? As the founders of our companies, we set the direction, and ultimately the buck stops with us, right? But in my experience, command and control kind of style leadership really doesn't work too well, especially in small businesses where you need your people to be flexible and ultimately just to get things done and do what needs to be done. That kind of command and control type of leadership really doesn't work. Fear is actually not a great motivator in the long term or even in the medium term. So, short term we might knuckle down to keep earning the money and paying the mortgage, to sort of keep hold of our job, but our heart really won't be in it, and we'll always be kind of looking around for alternatives. And what you really don't want, especially in a small business where everybody's mucking in, margins might be tight, and you're really close to the wire, you really don't want anybody with you that you're kind of carrying whose heart's not in it. Yeah, that command and control way of managing, it works to a certain extent in some larger organisations, but it really doesn't work in the kind of businesses that we're building. So actually, in my view, where your authority comes from is actually earning the respect of your team. It comes from setting a clear vision and a roadmap to where you want to get to, and crucially, why. Why are we building this? Why are we doing what we do? Why are we serving the people that we're serving? And it all really does come from asking rather than telling. Your authority comes from understanding that your job is not to have all the answers, but actually to get the best from all the people that you work with, all the people around you, whether they're employees, whether they're partners, whether they're outsourced contractors, all those people that are around you. Your job really is to get the best from them. And ultimately your authority, in my view, comes from putting yourself in flow and putting everybody around you in flow as much as you possibly can. So what do you think? Where do you think your authority comes from? And do you have any questions about management, about leadership? I think it's a really, really interesting topic. And when I was asked this by several people in the last few days, I thought, what an interesting question. Where does our authority come from as business owners and as managers and as leaders? So really interested to know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to close today's live, as I always do, actually with a quote, but actually I've got two quotes for you today. The first is from the wonderful Steve Jobs, And he is quoted as saying, management is about persuading people to do things they don't want to do, while leadership is about inspiring people to do things they never thought they could. What an amazing quote. Or put another way, from also the great Peter Drucker, management is about doing the right things. Leadership is about doing things right. And so as I don't ever want to persuade anybody, encourage anybody to persuade anybody else, I'm not a big fan of persuasion in that sense, maybe I need to rename when I'm talking about management, actually what I'm talking about, what we're talking about here is leadership. That's really what you want to be in your business. You want to be so much more than a manager, you want to really be a leader. So let me know your thoughts and any questions that you have on this or any other topic. What I would say is whatever you're doing this weekend and whoever you're doing it with, I wish you a happy and a peaceful time. I hope you get to enjoy this glorious sunshine that we're having. And as always, if you want to talk, you know where I am. So take care, stay safe, and as always, keep in touch. Bye for now.